We've got about 15 minutes for questions, so if you'd like to ask something, there's the microphones in the usual spots if you want to jump up there, and then we can come to you. And then I'll fill in if the room doesn't want to ask questions. Mary.
Hi, Mary Frone from Homeschooling TAFE here in Victoria. Thank you for all those presentations, they were fantastic. If possible, can I ask 2 questions, Lee?
Yep.
Okay. First one...
Special only for you.
First one to John. John, there's been lots of talk in the last 2 days about the rapid rate of change in industry. So my question to you is in regard to the product training packages and whether or not they will take us into the future with the flexibility that we need at the provider end. And my second question is to Keith. Thank you for that presentation on what Siemens is doing. I'm interested in why Siemens chose to go with 3 universities for the higher apprenticeship scheme when we're talking about vocational level quals. Thank you.
John.
Great, thank you. So firstly, there are a number of things happening to build more flexibility into the system. It'll all come back to that primary point I made, which is it's up to industry to take the lead. And what we're finding is that there is a greater need for units of competency that cross industry areas. So the AISC has set up a number of cross-sector projects that deal with supply chain, cybersecurity, digital transformation, because there's a recognition that there's an emerging sets of skills that do need to cross industries. It's also starting to look much more at this whole question of skill sets and micro-credentialing as a way to create more flexibility, because, you know, as everybody's aware, there's some fairly high statistics around the non-completion rates in qualifications, but when you look at the skill sets being utilised by industry, that's on the rise. And so flexibility will also come to those kind of micro levels. The only sort of other point I would make over the top of it, and it does come to things like Industry 4.0, is you've got to remember, you know, when we talk about the first transformation, the second, the third leading to this cyber-physical transformation, which is called Industry 4.0, we have many, many businesses in Australia that are still operating at that level 2 and level 3 industry level, and their needs are quite different. And one we don't recognise in Australia, we often talk about small to medium enterprise, but small to medium enterprise internationally is defined as businesses over $20 million. We have very small or micro enterprises driving this economy, which requires, again, a different approach to engagement and to support. And so if we're going to have flexibility in the training system, we've actually got to start building these packages around the real work that's being done and the real structure of industry to enable them those pathways to future growth.
Okay, thanks for the question. So the actual partnership, it's more complicated than what I could get through in a few minutes, but I'll be as fast as I can. The Prime Minister's task force was established and connected with Germany's approach. They have a group called Platform Industry 4.0 Group. Each of them have work streams, and we aligned the work streams to match because it's a whole of society preparation. And one of the work streams is the future of work in education and training. And as a company that has got this high-end technology, we wanted to get it into Australia in the fastest way possible. So the partnership with the universities is actually conditional, and that's the software grant side of it. But the condition is that the university partners with the TAFE to set up an apprenticeship program where the software is shared between the university and the TAFE, and there's a joint curriculum developed. And we've chosen 5 universities across Australia. We've done it in conjunction. The task force lead for this particular area is Professor Alex Zubik, Vice-Chancellor of R&D at Swinburne, and he's guiding us on the first universities to partner with. And it's about building capability for Australia. What we find is that a lot of Australian educational institutions are really doing things that are trying to compete with each other. And we're trying to build a capability for the nation, which is a very different thing. But yeah, the partnership at the university level is actually partnership with TAFE as well. Swinburne was the first because they cover everything from TAFE to very advanced research and development education. So that's where it started, but the next stage is each of the universities in the other states have to partner with a TAFE. We are struggling there, actually, on the TAFE side to get the interest. So that's where we're at.
Anybody else like to ask something? Oh, Craig. Well, let me see if I'll accept this question as...
I promise I won't get political at all. Sorry, I'm doing the wrong thing. Thank you for that, and we can understand where it started at Swinburne, which is a dual sector university, and we're not saying this is only the domain of the vet sector, but I think what we really need to be able to do is to get over this, I think, bias in this country that it's only universities that can do anything. It's actually TAFEs that you can trust. And what I can tell you is the last two, and as a demonstration of that, has been the last two presentations from Wodonga and Fortescue. So we're very happy to work with Simmons. There's no problems at all. We'll be knocking on your door next week. My question is for Linda, and this is a bit of a Dorothy Dixer, but what's made the difference for those Indigenous participants in your trades program in training on site compared to going into a classroom setting?
Sure. Thank you for the question. What's made the difference? I guess the reality is that most of our people are resident in Port Hedland and Karratha. So it does, and they have families. So they're all adults with families. So being able to go down to a TAFE in Perth for 3 weeks at a time was actually quite a big issue in terms of looking after children and all of those types of things. So when you're dealing with a large group of mature age people, you really do have to structure things differently. And we found that working together in small groups provided great networking support and alleviated a lot of the natural shyness and concern that people had in asking questions in a classroom type setting. So we've found that bringing TAFE to us and actually training in the workplace has been critical in helping people feel that they can actually take this on when they've been out of the training environment or classroom environment for a long, long period. So yeah, that's why we did it.
I've got time for a couple more questions if anyone wants to ask. Yep.
Robert Adams from Australian Industry Standards. My question's to Mark, because I noted in your presentation, Mark, you highlighted the collaboration you've got with 2 other TAFEs. I suppose my question is around the potential for, I suppose, increased collaboration, both in the domestic market, but I suppose also looking internationally, where I suppose if you look at large economies, the capability of a single TAFE or a single training organisation to tackle large projects, I think the picking's right for increased collaboration. So I'm just interested in your views.
And Mark, in that, because I had this question as well, in that, can you elaborate on, what were the barriers when you were trying to get that collaboration happening?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to answer a good question. I'd start off by saying, domestically, I think TAFE has been on a massive transformational journey over the last few years. So we have moved to a place where I think we're much more mature as a network, and I think what we're seeing is a lot more opportunities to collaborate and cooperate with each other. Particularly, I think, in areas like curriculum development, where a shared approach to developing a really high standard of curriculum across the TAFE network creates a point of difference for TAFE against everybody else. So I think we're seeing significant change and an acknowledgement that you can actually be really good partners with other TAFEs and collaborate and still compete in other areas. And perhaps internationally, a good example would be a lot of TAFEs across our country have fantastically successful international programs. But this year, the Victorian government's led a sector-wide Victorian TAFE approach to a new market opportunity in Indonesia. And I think that's a really positive step forward, because I think it helps us to collaborate and work together. It also addresses a massive need in that particular country, and for some of those smaller TAFEs that are looking at ways to innovate and grow to remain sustainable, it gives them a foot in the market that they've probably not had before, and the opportunity again to leverage off those highly experienced bigger TAFEs that are well established in that marketplace.
Anybody else? Yeah.
That's my exercise for the day. A question to our latter two speakers, and I think it builds on the notion of getting other unrepresented or underrepresented groups involved. I was particularly interested that both of you focused on women in male-dominated trades, and I was just wondering if both of you would like to reflect on the joys and downfalls, the enablers and barriers that enabled you to bring that sort of initiative to a head.
I'm having a little fight about who starts first, so I'll go. Look, I think it kind of struck me that trying to find a 17-year-old girl who wanted to be a boilermaker was like looking for the unicorns. I mean, I do think they exist, but they're usually in another dimension. So we decided to kind of look at why not start with people who were already over a lot of the barriers in their own minds, and they were already on a mine site, they were already working, and they kind of thought, you know, I can do this. So the reflection for us was simply, let's give it a crack. Let's just talk to our people and see who puts their hand up if we provide the opportunity. So actually the hardest thing was deciding to provide the opportunity. And in 2015, we had around 500 Aboriginal employees who are direct employees of Fortescue. And when we put out this opportunity as an expression of interest, you know, do you want to take on a trade? 74 of them applied. I was shocked. We were all shocked at that number, so close to 20%. And, you know, we put them through all of the rigorous selection processes that we would normally apply to apprentices, and the quality of application was so high. We actually took many more people than we thought we would in that first group. So we ended up taking 29. And this was with no budget, no training centre, no nothing. We kind of just start things at Fortescue and make it work from there. So I think the hardest thing is deciding to give it a go. And the beautiful thing is you realise you don't just mine iron ore, you actually mine your own workforce for talent, and you find that you actually have gold as well as iron ore when you do that. So that's what we found.
And for us, it was really just a great example whereby if you've got a good partnership with a couple of industry partners, then you do actually make time to talk about improvements. And it was round the table through good engagement that we just saw the economic sense and how we could fill a gap in the marketplace in an industry that was desperately in need of more drivers. And then, you know, they were showing us the statistics around only 4 or 5% of female participation. So it was really a sort of a no-brainer at that stage where we saw the opportunity. And from my perspective, it was fantastic for Lynn Fox and Australia Post to back TAFE to find a solution for them. And now they've seen that program be successful. I think it's going to grow significantly over the months and years ahead. So I just think it's an opportunity where industry and training providers really do need to connect better and more often.
Can I just add to that? One of the interesting observations, Dulux Australia is one of our customers, and they've built, for those who don't know, the most advanced paint facility in the world is now in Melbourne, in Merrifield, and that's all based on our automation technology, so we're heavily involved in that. And what I notice when I walk around that plant, and what they've said to me, is I notice that there's a lot of young women in there. And they said, yeah, it's because, you know, they have another paint facility in Queensland, and that paint facility you can't walk through in a suit without getting paint all over it on the way out. And he said, the guy said, this is a black suit facility, so you can walk through here without a speck of dust or paint on you. So the technology actually interests a much broader group of people. The Queensland factory, he said, we don't have any women in it, not because they don't encourage it, it's because they don't get anyone interested in working in that type of work. So as you become more paperless, more automated, the roles of traditional manufacturing change. So now they're using iPads and they're interacting with automation systems. It's completely different. So 30% of the workforce at Merrifield are actually females. So that's a change that you'll start to see in Industry 4.0 as well.
We're out of time. We're going to break for lunch now. If you can come back at 1:45 sharp for the final session of the conference, and please thank our panel.